I greet you, ladies and gentlemen, as I start sharing this lecture on monetary policy in theory and practice. And before I look at monetary policy, I'm going to look at money demand in detail. And I will be relying on a source which was published by the African Economic Research Consortium. So without much ado, I'm going to share my screen. So we are still continuing with our module, Central Banking and Monetary Economics, CPA 5213. And the topic that we're going to look at is monetary policy in theory and practice. And we're going to take quite a bit of time looking at the money demand function. So under the money demand function, we're going to look at three main schools of thought: the classical, the Keynesian, and the Cambridge school of thought. So those are the acknowledgements of the material that I used to produce these lecture slides. Because as academics in the academic community, we rely on each other's material and we acknowledge it when we use it for crafting our lectures. I find this material quite detailed and very much appropriate for master's level students. So I selected some concepts, and then under monetary policy, I used material from elsewhere. So when we are looking at the concept of money, money is a difficult concept to define in that it fulfills several functions. So the functions of money have been a subject of much theoretical and empirical work. Some, in the narrow sense, they define money as just currency, either paper currency or coinage, decreased by legislation to be such. There are two major functions of money that have been identified by monetary economists such as Handa and others over time, which are the medium of exchange or payment function, and the money being used as a unit of account. As a medium of exchange, money is used to facilitate transactions. And we have got electronic forms of money like credit cards and debit cards, as well as your PayPal and so on, your internet banking. And then money is also used as a yardstick or as a meter, or a means by which we measure the value of other things. We know in the money markets, money is a commodity, but it's used to measure the value of other commodities. There can be no pricing which can take place in any modern economy or even in a non-modern economy without the use of money. If it is barter trade, it's difficult to come up with a universally agreed system of money or a universally agreed system of valuing things. When values are expressed in terms of money, the number of prices is reduced from a factor of n-1 in barter trade to in barter trade or in a barter economy to n-1 in a monetary economy. Money as a unit of account also facilitates accounting, the whole field of accounting and finance. The whole field of accounting, finance, and banking, it wouldn't exist if there was no money. Assets of all kinds, liabilities of all kinds, incomes of all kinds, and expenses of all kinds can be stated in common monetary units, which can be added or subtracted, multiplied or divided. So we know that the money is also used as a store of value, which is a secondary function, that you can store value in terms of money, and you can use money as a bridge to cross to the future, so to speak, by capturing and impounding the value of commodities in money, so that you can command those commodities in the future as and when you need them. So we know that there are storage costs that are involved in storing physical commodities and trying to exchange them in the near future when you need certain commodities. But when you are storing money, with the use of money, it facilitates the evolution and development of other financial instruments, such as your promissory notes, your bonds, your mortgages, your preferred stocks, as well as physical assets such as household furniture, houses, land, and so on. So when you look at physical commodities, when you are storing them, they tend to depreciate over time. New commodities can be introduced. So in monetary terms, they may depreciate, and they may be illiquid as well. You may discover that you are stuck with something which people no longer need in the future. A car which is out of date or out of date, or a television which is outdated, and so on and so forth. And there are storage costs for physical commodities, which people ordinarily don't care when it comes to just keeping money. And the fourth function is that money can be used as a standard for deferred payments. I will correct that. This is a fourth function. The fourth function, that money can be used as a standard for deferred payments. Because we looked at number 3, store of value, number 2, unit of account, number 1, medium of exchange. So that's a fourth function. And then they are contingent. As a standard for deferred payments, the money facilitates things like buying commodities, in the future, before maize is actually planted on the ground, or grains are actually even produced. We are able to engage in forward and futures markets before even minerals are mined. We are able to access them. And then it also facilitates the real estate business, where people are able to buy and own a house 25 years in advance. 25 years in advance. And then there are other contingent functions of money, which are incidental functions of money. Money is one of the most liquid. It's the most liquid of all assets. So, wealth can be in terms of financial instruments such as your bonds, debentures, derivatives, and so on. So money facilitates trade in these financial instruments because it introduces liquidity into the money markets or even the capital markets. Money is the basis of the credit system. People are able to give each other loans because of money. And then money also brings about the equalization of marginal utility and productivity in what is known as the Equi-Machina Principle. We know that according to indifference curve analysis, the marginal utility of X is equal to lambda P of X, where given that px and lambda marginal utility of good x can be estimated. So we can estimate, for instance, our lambda. Our lambda becomes mu of x over p, which is the weighted marginal utility. We are able to have the concept of weighted marginal utility, which is our lambda because of money, because px stands for just the price of commodity x. It stands for the price of commodity x. And then mu of x is the marginal utility of commodity x. In the same vein, we have got, under labor productivity theory, we have got the concept of the Equi-Machina Principle as well, where the wage rate is equal to the weighted marginal product of labor, where the wage rate, which can be lambda, where the weighted marginal utility will be lambda or delta, whatever Greek letter you introduce, which is equal to MPL over W, where W is the price of labor. And if it is capital, you have your epsilon being equal to MPK over the interest rate, which is R, MPK, the Equi-Machina Principle. Those things, these concepts that I'm alluding to, they can be easily verified from any elementary microeconomics textbook. For those who might thought, you can easily verify this from your first year notes at undergraduate level. We also are able to measure national income because of the use of money in an economy. If the economy was relying on barter trade, we wouldn't be able to ascertain how much an economy produces within a given period of time. We are also able to ascertain the distribution of factor rewards, such as wages, rent, interest, and profit, because these can be denominated in monetary terms. So, monetary terms. And then what follows is just the, critical analysis about the concept of money, which notes I'm going to send to you, those that I'm teaching this course on central banking and monetary economics. So I've covered the basic issues that I wanted you to know about the concept of money. There is the Keynesian concept of money and all of that stuff. And there are the three motives of Keynes for holding money, which are the transactions motive, the speculative motive, and the precautionary motive for holding money. But these ones, I'm going to look at them under money demand. So I want to now explore the concept of money demand very quickly. The objective of this lecture or exposition is that the students should be able to explain and discuss the difference between classicalist, that is Fischerian approach, and Keynes approach to demand for money. Analyze and differentiate the transaction approach from the Cambridge approach to money demand. So we'll start with the classical approach. Let me just correct that spelling. So when we are looking at the classical approach, we realize that classical economists such as Irving Fischer did not explicitly formulate demand for money theory, but their views were inherent in the quantity theory of money, which they actually inherited from classical economic philosophers such as Adam Smith and David Hume. They considered money only as a medium of exchange. That's the function which was emphasized by classicalists, which is still being emphasized by classicalists, even up to this day, the monetarists. the medium of exchange. Other functions, they were sort of downplayed. So the cash transactions approach was popularized by Irving Fischer in his book entitled Purchasing Power of Money, which was published in 1911. Through his equation of exchange, he made an attempt to determine the price level and value of money. Symbolically, the Fischer equation of exchange, this is a variation of it. It is written under MV prime, M prime V prime plus MV is equal to PT. That's equation 1, where M is the total quantity of money and M prime is the credit. It is the credit money, because we know that currency in circulation is not the only money that is available in an economy. So there is also credit money. And then V and V prime is the velocity of circulation of money, which is M, and V prime is the velocity of circulation of credit in an economy. And P is the general price level. T is the total amount of goods and services exchanged for money in an economy, the total volume of transactions. So if we multiply the general price level by the total volume of transactions, we get it has to correspond to the amount of money which is circulating in an economy, which is credit money and the actual currency which is circulating in an economy. This equation equates the demand for money PT to money supply, which is MV. But this money supply, which is MV, there's also the credit aspect of money, which we know when we look at the credit creation mechanism in elementary macroeconomics at undergraduate level. The value of money is meant by purchasing power of money. When if I can just go back to that, the value of money means the purchasing power of money, because we can't divorce money from its purchasing power. In order to find out the effect of the quantity of money on the general price level or the value of money, we write the equation as P. So we sort of make P the subject of the formula by dividing through with T. MV may be taken as a constant. So if you look at that if we look at that equation, you realize that if you divide right through with T, it ought to be P is equal to MV over T, MV divided by T. So what it simply means is that the general price level is positively associated and negatively influenced by changes in transactions. And value of money. So it's positively associated with the value of money and negatively influenced by changes in the general price level. Now, when we look at the assumptions of Fischer pertaining to V and T, he assumed that V and T were constant. The quantity of money M is constant over time because it's an institutional variable which is influenced by the government. And the total level of transaction, I mean the transactions velocity of money is also constant over time because it's amenable to things like payment technologies and so on. So given those are Fischerian assumptions, the nominal quantity of money is fixed by the central bank. And the number of transactions in a period is a function of national income. So it can also be taken as fixed. So if our velocity of circulation remains constant and is independent of M, P, and T, this yields a theory of the demand for money, where money demand can then be taken as, because when you look at this part, it will be a constant. It will be constant. So if I am to rewrite, for instance, if I'm to rewrite that part, it means P, it means our P will be equal to a constant, which I will just call C, plus, because isn't it, I've just said the money stock is determined by the central bank. The transactions velocity of circulation is determined by payment technologies and other factors, and the volume of transactions is determined by national income. So this whole thing is actually a constant. And then I would be having MV, M prime. I can even just say the C plus M prime V prime T M prime T, and then I would be, if I rewrite that, it will be PT is equal to C plus it will be C, if I cross multiply by T, it will be CT plus M prime V divided by T multiplied by T, because I've cross multiplied by T to cancel out the T from there. But this C, remember the C, remember what the C actually is. The C is actually MV over T. It's now being multiplied by T, and then plus MV. We're just moving backwards, which gives us PT, which is equal to MV plus, which is where we started. prime, which is, prime, M prime, V prime. And then if I can decide to take M to the other side, I've got many things that I can do here. I can either factorize M, because I want a theory for the demand for money. I can factorize M, and then I will have V plus V prime which is equal to PT, and then I can divide both sides by V plus V prime, divide both sides by V plus V prime. So those, they will cancel each other out. They will cancel each other out. The V plus V prime. They will cancel each other out. As you can see in that demonstration, and then we'll remain with M being equal to PT over V plus V prime. So I shifted that to the next slide. We're still developing our concept of money demand. What this simply says, this exposition simply tells us is that our money demand, because we know V and V prime, they are likely to be constant, and T is also constant. So given that T over V plus V prime equals to K, small k, this implies that M is equal to no, 1, not, is equal to PTK, because our K is 1 over V plus VT. I mean 1 over V plus V prime, which is a constant. We know K and T are constants. So it means our money demand is influenced by changes in the general price level. Our money demand will be influenced by changes in the general price level, all other things being constant. So according to, if you check my exposition, it is just the same as the elementary exposition where credit money is excluded. In most elementary textbooks, the plus M prime V prime is excluded. But if you look at V and V prime, these are sort of institutional variables which are constant over time, because it's payment technologies that influence the velocity of circulation of money. And we know technology changes in the long run. So in the short run, this sum, V plus V prime, is a constant. It is a constant. So that's why I'm saying let K be equal to 1 over V plus V prime, such that now I will be, this K will be multiplying the T, because it's T divided by that, which is just T multiplied by the K, which now stands for 1 over V plus V prime. So this takes us back to the original exposition about the money demand function. So our elementary money demand function becomes money demand is equal to PTK. In most formulations, it will be K PT, where PT is the volume of transactions in monetary terms, the nominal level of transactions, and K is the inverse of the combined velocity of circulation of money in an economy. So what it simply tells us is that money is a function of the changes in the general price level, money demand in an economy. Ceteris paribus. So in terms of the three factors that affect money demand, it's the number of transactions, the average price transfers, and the velocity of circulation of money. But we already know that in the short run, the total volume of transactions, which is the number of transactions, and the velocity of circulation, they are assumed to be constant in the short run. Especially when you look at the concept of full employment. So the average price transfers, which is a proxy for the general price level, is the one which will be changed. And then that's the quantity theory of money. It culminates in a situation where money demand is just a function of the changes in the general price level. And then we move on to the Cambridge School. The Cambridge cash balances theory of demand for money was put forward by Cambridge economists such as Alfred Marshall, A.C. Pico, and Robertson. It places emphasis on the function of money as a store of value or wealth, instead of Fischer's emphasis or obsession with money as a medium of exchange. Although they recognized that current interest rate, wealth owned by individuals, expectations of future prices, and future rate of interest determine the demand for money. They, however, believed that changes in these factors, they remain constant or proportionate to changes in the individual's income. So in their approach, the aggregate demand for money can be expressed as KPY, where MD is the aggregate demand for money, and K is a constant, that same constant which we had in Alfred Marshall's, in the Fischer quantity theory of money formulation, and P is the general price level, and Y is national income. So PY is nominal national income, and P is the general price level in the economy. So K is the proportion of national income that people want to hold as cash balances. Yes, which is akin to your transactions velocity of circulation. The slope of the function is equal to k, the slope of the function. So if we make py the subject of the formula, if we make py the subject of the formula, we will have py being equal to md over k, which is what we see on the next, no, we don't see that on the next slide. We can make k the subject of the formula. That is true. Py is equal to md over k, but if we want k, small k is equal to, we have to divide both sides by py. So we'll be having md over py. What does that tell us? That simply tells us that this slope simply tells us it's important. It's an important feature of the cash balances approach, in that it makes the demand for money a function of money income alone. That is nominal national income. Because remember, your PY is nominal national income, because your P is the average level of prices and your Y is national income. So this K is equal to MD over PY. It makes money demand to be inversely related to nominal national income, so to speak, because the K constant is equal to MD over PY. The merit of this formulation is that it makes the relationship between the demand for money and income as behavioral, in sharp contrast to the Fischer formulation. So what we observe with the Cambridge school or approach is that instead of just assuming that money demand is a function of the change in the general price level, money demand is related to a change in nominal national income. So we go a step further than just relating cash holdings in an economy to the general price level, which is an index of your inflation, to relating cash holdings or money holdings to the nominal level of national income in an economy. Marshall's formula is as follows. M is equal to KY, where M is the quantity of money and Y is the total money income. K is the coefficient whole function to bring the two sides into balance. So K is like a slope of this function. M is equal to KY. So Pico expressed the form of an equation as P is equal to KR over M, or M is equal, or M over KR. M over KR, if P is equal to KR, for us to have M over KR, we can cross multiply. We can experiment, ladies and gentlemen, by saying PM, I've cross multiplied by M, is equal to KR, is equal to KR. And then now I can have my P being equal to I can have my P being equal to KR being equal to KR over M, that's my P, which is equal to KR over M. If you look at KR over M, it is the reciprocal of M over KR. It's the reciprocal of M over. If I want to have M over KR being an element, I will say P is equal to 1 divided by open brackets KR over, if I want this part, M over KR, I will just say 1 over KR, the reciprocal, over M. It just returns us to that. If you look at where P stands for the value of money or its inverse, the general price level. So if you look at P is the value of money or the inverse, which is the general price level. And M represents money supply. R is the total national income. K represents that fraction of R for which people wish to hold as cash balances. So if I make K the subject of the formula, let us assume I want to make K the subject of the formula. I can start from this part. I can start from that part. Or rather, I can start from the first part, which I formulated from that part. To make K the subject of the formula, I will have K being equal to PM divided by R. Remember what R is the total level of national income, and the M is money supply. And P is the value of money or its inverse, the general price level. P is the general price level. Just a simple and straightforward formulation. So K represents the fraction now of R. It is the fraction of R that people wish to keep as cash according to Pico. And then we move on to Keynes' liquidity preference theory. We move on to Keynes' liquidity preference theory. We just correct that. Money demand, continued. Were there when we were looking at the Cambridge school. I had to approach things, ladies and gentlemen. Those schools, each and every one of those schools of thought is a topic in itself. But because we're covering so many themes, I had to just select the things which make these schools of thought actually different from each other. I will also send a handout which simplifies these schools of thought without the formulae that you see here in the exposition. So next we are moving on to Keynes' liquidity preference theory, which is based on three motives: the transactions motive for holding money, the precautionary motive, and the speculative demand for money. When we are looking at the transactions motive, according to Keynes and these followers, people need money in order to carry out day-to-day transactions. This might be for business or for final consumption purposes, for people to be able to execute sales and expenditures in the economy. They need money. And this is taken to be constant or unrelated to changes in the interest rate. So when we are looking at this demand for money, it is directly proportionate or proportional to changes in national income. As national income increases, we expect this liquidity preference demand for money for transactions to also increase, ceteris paribus, but it has got absolutely no interest with absolutely no relationship with the interest rate. So according to Keynes, the interest rate and transactions demand have got no relationship. But there are two renowned post-Keynesian economists who are William J. Palmer and James Topping, who have shown that there is some linkage between transactions demand for money and the rate of interest rate. So in other words, they critique it, even though they are post-Keynesians, and they rely so much on Keynesian thinking. They've acknowledged that interest rates may actually influence the transactions demand for money. But in the classical, if I may put it that way, or the original Keynes formulation, the transactions demand for money has got absolutely no relationship with the interest rate. And then we've got the precautionary demand for money, which has to do with unforeseen opportunities or advantageous purchases. This again is held to be constant because it has to do with things which are more or less possible to estimate using probability or statistics. Things like sickness, accidents, and unexpected events. We know these things, they are open to chance and they are unforeseen, but they can be held when we look at the law of large numbers to be more or less constant. So the precautionary demand for money also does not vary with changes in the interest rate, ceteris paribus. So the precautionary demand for money with regard to the interest rate in the original formulation is constant with regard to the interest rate, and it is constant also with regard to income. But for post-Keynesians, like William J. Palmer and others, it is inversely related to national income and the interest rate. And then we've got the speculative or asset demand for money, which is related to money being used for store value purposes. This one was the one in the original version of the demand for money theory, which was assumed to be negatively related to the interest rate because of the term structure of interest rates and the inverse relationship between the price of a financial asset and the present value of a financial asset. When you look at we know that the future value of a bond is equal to the present value plus the interest rate multiplied by the present value. The interest rate multiplied by the present value. This implies that the future value, this implies that PV plus R, PV equals FV, and then we factorize PV, which will be 1 plus R, which is equal to the future value of a bond, and then we divide both sides by PV, V divided by PV, or rather PV factor of 1 plus R divided by PV equals to FV divided by we divide both sides by 1 plus R, which is equal to FV divided by 1 plus R, which gives us PV equals to FV divided by 1 plus R. So I can cancel that. These two, they cancel each other out. Those two, they cancel each other out. So I remain with PV being equal to FV over 1 plus R. So this simply tells us that the current value, the present value of a bond is inversely related to the interest rate which is prevailing. So there is an inverse relationship between the present value or the current price of a bond or a financial asset and the interest rate. So the total demand for money in the original theory of John Maynard Keynes is determined by the interest rate via the speculative demand for money. This is covered in elementary textbooks of, macroeconomics, principles of macroeconomics. So we'll be having a situation where when we formulate a linear function of money demand, we have got the constant C0, which is that quantity of money which people hold, which is unrelated to changes in national income and the interest rate, which people just hold, maybe for, for transactions purposes or for the precautionary purposes. And then there is the part which is positively related to the interest rate. Positively related to national income. We know as national income increases, people, they need more money to carry out increased transactions, and it's inversely related to the interest rate because of what I just developed on that slide. So C1 is greater than 0 and C2 is less than 0. C1 is positive because money demand is positively related to changes in national income. As national income increases, we expect people to demand more cash balances to carry out increased transactions in an economy, and also for more opportunities that exist in the economy. But as the interest rate increases, the opportunity cost of money sort of increases. People save more, which means they demand less money in terms of money holdings, other things being equal. So the criticisms of the Keynesian theory, jump stopping levels two main criticisms. The first one is that in Keynes theory, investors are assumed to hold all their wealth in bonds, other than the amount of money held for transaction purposes, as long as the interest rates exceed the critical rate. It's an all or nothing choice. A rate below which the expected capital loss on bonds outweighed the interest earnings on bonds. If, on the contrary, the interest rate falls below the critical level, investors would hold no bonds, i.e., they would hold their entire wealth in terms of money. This all or nothing choice, we know in the real world it doesn't exist. People at any given time, there's, a spectrum of so many infinite combinations of money and something else that people will be holding. It's not a question of either or. Yeah. And then when you look at changes in the nominal interest rate, Keynes assumed that investors hold money as an asset so long as the interest rate is low. That is, the price of a financial asset or a bond is high. The reason is that they expect the interest rate to rise and return to the normal level. According to Keynes, there exists a fixed or a slowly changing normal level for the interest rate around which the actual rate of interest gravitates. So there is this issue about the normal rate, which is taken as a benchmark against which to judge the possibility of the interest rate changing either upwards or downwards to determine the level of money holdings held for speculative purposes. But according to James Toppin, the normal level itself keeps on changing over time. It's not something which is constant. This explains why a portfolio diversification is a constantly moving thing. An individual's portfolio choice, that is his decision to diversify, does not depend on the restrictive assumption of John Maynard Keynes about the expectations of investors of a return on the interest rate to a normal level. So this concept of the interest rate being required to return to a normal level, in reality, according to empirical studies, it may not actually hold. It is against this backdrop that we start the Toppin's portfolio theory for the demand for money. But it's something which you will explore on your own. I decided that we won't cover it under this course outline because of the need for us to cover monetary policy. So in my next lecture, I'm going to be looking at monetary policy. And I believe I will be able to cover it in one lecture. Thank you so much for listening in. I believe you benefited from this highly summarized exposition of money demand and the concept of money.